Today we're talking about a game with a name that rolls as easily off the tongue as your grandma's soft-boiled potatoes. Realm Royale. I'm not even sure what the abbreviation for this game is gonna be. I think it's gonna be something like RRR. So, with that said, obviously, first topic that's gonna come up when we're talking about a game that has any sort of element of that sort is this game like Fortnite? Yes, this game is somewhat like Fortnite, because every game in the Battle Royale shooter is somewhat like Fortnite, and everyone tries to put their own twist on it, and Fortnite weren't the first ones. So maybe let's just not spend the rest of the video talking about that, but let's talk about what's different or what the game's about. Why are we talking about this today? Well, the game was released on Steam today. It's still released as an alpha game, so we have a long way to go, but it's released. Well, the name of Realm Royale is not simple. The concept of the game is you end up in a battleground with 100 other players. There's a circle that slowly closes off. You collect items to get stronger and you kill enemies along the way until there are only 2 people left, and then it's a battle to the death until there's the last man standing, and that's the winner of the Realm Royale. So far so good, nothing that hasn't been done before though. The game was originally released as a mode for Paladins. And as you can probably tell from this little clip here, it was very, very awkward to play at the time. It felt very clunky, very unbalanced between the characters and the abilities and whatnot. And really, it didn't feel like any sort of Battle Royale game either. It was just more like throwing the characters in the world and then hope to get some items, but that wasn't what the game was about. Now, a lot of that has changed. Since then, we've gone through a version where we basically only had one default character that everyone played, but there was more of a focus on a weapon system, and now the game is very far away from what it was at the start in terms of how abilities and characters work, though the world and the base mechanics are still somewhat similar. The overlap between Paladins itself and Realm Royale also has gotten a lot smaller. There are still some traces where you can basically see where it came from. For example, the logo looks relatively similar in its style, and there is a brief mention of the game being inspired by Paladins, but outside of the visual style, a lot of the feel seems to be at least somewhat different. And speaking of different, this brings us to the point we can talk a little bit about what is actually different about this game, and also what sets it apart from other similar games. So the biggest deal with this game is that there are classes, and that's the main point where it sets itself apart from other Battle Royale games. You do not all start with the same default character, but instead choose between 4 classes. I'm not sure if there will be more classes added in the future. At the moment it looks like they kind of want to stick to that just by the way it's designed, but those 5 different classes all have different perks along with that. And these perks actually make for very different gameplay styles. Each of these classes has a different base ability, a mobility ability. One, for example, is a leap, another one is a blink, another one is the ability to float for a moment. And then they all have different passives, they all have different legendary items they can build, and they all have different abilities. That doesn't mean that you have all this from the start though. You start out with only your movement ability and you don't have any other abilities. And like in any other Battle Royale, you can then loot items. And when you loot items, you can not only find items that give you more defense or other stats, but you can also find items that are abilities that you can equip and use. That means you can only equip 2 abilities at a time plus your mobility ability, so a total of 3 abilities. Due to the nature of exactly this, I haven't had the chance to test all abilities yet on all characters, especially because there's no overview as well so far, but I can give you a little bit of a look into how the different classes work. The warrior gains 5 health per second, so a little bit of extra sustain. His special weapon is an axe, and he's got a leap, a forward leap that allows you to engage on enemies. He also has a dash to go through enemies that he can pick up, a healing, an AoE healing, a shield potion that's in a small area, and a net to catch enemies. The engineer gains 5 armor per second, which you can get on top of the health, has some sort of rifle as his legendary weapon. The jump is in this case straight up, but much higher. And what I know about his abilities is that he has some sort of healing totem, a turret that he can put down, and some sort of barrier that he can use to shield himself off. The assassin gains 10% extra ground speed, has some sort of sniper rifle as his legendary weapon, has a blink, so a short distance teleport as his movement ability, and has at least one ability that allows you to avoid projectiles for a while. Based on one of the icons, I also expect that he has a bomb, kind of like Bomb King and Paladins, that you can put on the ground and you have to avoid it basically. The mage has a rather strange passive, a 30% potion effectiveness increase, along with some sniper staff kind of as a ultimate weapon or a legendary weapon, and the ability to float around a little bit, float up as well, which is very nice in my opinion. I don't know all the abilities yet. I know that she can shoot fireballs, and I think she can freeze herself to avoid damage and create a wall. The hunter gains 10% weapon swap speed and 10% reload speed, has a bow as the legendary weapon, has a forward roll that you can use as an escape, though it sometimes gets you stuck in walls as well, which is very fun. Has some sort of arrow projectile ability, some sort of a back flip or backwards leap, and a mine that she can use. So as you can tell, there's quite a lot going on between all these different characters. They do not feel balanced so far, but that's not so surprising when we consider that the characters were actually recently released and previously we only had one character. That will probably even itself out over time. 5 characters shouldn't be too hard to balance. Design-wise, HiRez kind of took a step back here. While in Paladins we have a lot of different looking characters, all the classes in Realm Royale are basically just humans. There are enough nuances between them to tell them apart, but really no major feat in design here. These different classes also come with another impact. You cannot loot every single item from every single enemy. The item has to be something that your class can use, otherwise you'll just have to leave it on the ground. Another little note on weapons here, there are not only ranged weapons but also a few melee weapons, namely swords and axes, so if that's your preferred playstyle you can use that as well. Across the map you generally find plenty of different items, and that's somewhat necessary. You can equip a helmet, a chest piece, gauntlets and shoes, so you're kind of looking for items most of the time, because those extra stats can really benefit you. On top of that, you can carry 2 different weapons, and there are weapons of different rarity, so you might want to upgrade a little bit here and there and just switch between weapons. Though at the moment it seems to be impossible to figure out which stats your current item actually has, at least I wasn't able to find it either in the inventory or on any other hotkey. The abilities also have upgrade versions, so that's something to keep an eye out for as well. But obviously you will come across items that you don't want to use, and that doesn't mean that they are not useful to you at all. Because what you can do in this game is you can disenchant items that are on the ground, and that gives you shards, and that's actually a very core mechanic of this game that you want to play around to at least some degree. Across the map you will see many so-called forges. In these forges you can use the shards that you get from disenchanted items to build better items for yourself. You can either build health or armor potions, which do exactly what their name sounds like, they give you health or armor back, or you can build legendary armor pieces, legendary class abilities, or legendary class weapons. Now obviously, as legendary indicates, these are the best ones that you can get in the game most of the time, so you really want to have these equipment pieces. And by using the forge, it's also guaranteed that this is going to be an item that you can actually equip and use. Building these things takes a fair amount of shards. A class weapon comes in at 120 shards, but even a legendary armor still has 60 shards, and both take 60 seconds to make. And that means that you want to guard the area that you're in when this happens. You will have a brief period after the item spawns where it's locked for you, someone else can loot it, but if you're not there quickly enough, other people may go there and pick up your items. Or they may fight you there, because the moment you activate a forge, the forge will get smoke coming out of the top, so people will see from a distance that you're probably somewhere around the area. That means that the forges will often force fights. This could be people trying to defend their items at the forge, people trying to attack a forge when they know that somebody's in their building, or a third party coming in and just trying to rush over both while the fight's going on. So far, none of the rounds that I've played has actually felt slow-paced or with too much downtime, because at some point you would always find someone before it would get boring. The circle closes in at a reasonable rate, so you have to keep moving at some point, but it's not like you're completely rushed. And that's pretty much all there is for the gameplay itself. Now, this game does a lot of things right. I like the concept of being able to choose different weapons, different playstyles, different abilities, and especially as somebody who prefers melee playstyles most of the time, that is a very welcoming addition. But that is not to say that this game doesn't have a long way to go in terms of polishing. As of now, the graphics of the game are kind of washed out Play-Doh style, which I guess is very acceptable for an alpha. And many of the other flaws actually are very acceptable for an alpha as well, but that doesn't mean that I shouldn't mention them at all. The combat overall feels clunky and honestly a bit imbalanced. That might be my lack of knowledge in the game so far, but it seems like certain combinations just are overwhelmingly better than others to a degree that I feel is somewhat strange in a Battle Royale game, which should still to some degree depend on skill. The classes once again feel somewhat unbalanced as well, and there's just a lot of buggy stuff going on. You have chests spawning in walls that don't spawn any items, items spawning in walls, things that you cannot pick up even though you should be able to. You have different types of bugs when it comes to mobility and dashes where you just get almost stuck in walls. And generally the experience does not feel polished. It feels very hiccupy and very stuttery at times. So there's a lot of ironing out to do before this game really can get to a beta state even. And I guess that's okay, but you should know this if you're trying this game in this stage. I think trying this game a few months down the road will be more fun for most people, as the game will then have a lot more polishing done on it, and as we know from HiRez, it takes a while for them to get the polishing down. Also, as it stands, you can only queue the game in squads or by voluntarily putting yourself at a disadvantage and playing against squads when you're not in a full squad. So you have to have 4 people if you really want to get the full gameplay experience. We played with 2 people initially and it kind of sucked, and then we played it with 4 people and it was a lot more enjoyable and a lot more fun, especially because you can mix all these classes and try different strategies as well. But then at the same time, some things about this feel weird. The death mechanic in Royale is kind of strange, as you are a chicken once you die, and then you can run around as a chicken, which is in itself cool. But at the same time, you cannot be revived by teammates. You have to run around for like 30 seconds until you get automatically revived again, which makes sense for solo play, but if you're playing with your team, it's a bit strange. So obviously your teammates can defend you, but you're still a chicken and there's a high risk of you dying. At the same time, you're not as slow as in other Battle Royale games once you're down, so I guess that makes up for it. But I would rather have something where my teammates can help me when I'm playing a team play focused game. Now, do I think Royale in its current state is a game worth playing? It's free, so saying it's worth it or not is kind of not the question here. I would say give it a shot if you're interested in the concept of what you heard so far, and if not, that's completely fine too. I don't think this game is gonna be a Fortnite competitor or anything similar. I think it's gonna have its own niche, much like Smite did have its own niche in terms of where it fits in with the other games, because it's the only one currently that offers these classes, and I'm really happy that they brought that back, because that was what to me was a selling point for the game. And I also like the fact that it's not focused around building, but instead using your abilities. I would like to see some more focus on the abilities and some less on the shooting itself, so that you can play more around with your class itself and not have the abilities as much of a gimmick. But that's just me, and I'm pretty sure other people will have a very different opinion on that. Royale is a bit of a diamond in the rough, but it's most certainly better than Paladins Battlegrounds ever was. And that for me is something that's already a positive development. I would recommend keeping an eye on this game and seeing how it develops if you don't like it in its current state, but you're interested in the concept, and then maybe come back to it one day, much like I do with Darwin Project. And the difference here is that I can play Darwin Project if I want to play with 2 people, and I can play Royale if I want to play with 4. And with that, thank you guys for watching. I hope this was interesting and insightful, gave you a bit of an overview for this game. If you're new to the channel, feel free to hit the sub button and the bell, it really helps me out. Other than that, see you for the next one tomorrow. DukeSloth, out.